Hello, BookTube. Uh, well, there was a trend last week in BookTube. It it befuddled me, but it did keep coming up enough so that it definitely gets the trend of the week, and that was May book hauls. Uh, it's I don't understand that. We're well into June, and I guess that's just me because I do nothing but read, and the rest of you have lives to lead. Uh, But I was watching all of these May book hauls on June 5th, June 6th, June 7th. It's just endless May book hauls. I kept remembering the fact that I have, as of this morning, read 16 books in June and 480 in 2016. So, so the idea of doing a May book haul this late in the month just seems weird to me. But it was fun to watch, but it was a little disorienting. And a smaller trend for the week, but also very much fun to watch, was all the response videos to the Hot and Sicky Summer Novel Writing Challenge put up by the guys at Stripcover Lit. Uh, I am on word count. I am doing just fine for my novel at Stripcover Lit. You're supposed to do 488 words a day for June, July, August, and September, at the end of which time, if you do that, you will have the spine of a very good novel. You will have a healthy novella. Mine is called Hers the Convergence. It's a mathematical fantasy life of Isaac Newton. And it took a bit of research, and it's a great deal of fun to write. And I'll take this opportunity. I'll make a video on my own, but I take this opportunity to encourage all of you who are maybe on the fence or who are behind or who are still thinking about it, jump right on board. The guys are right when they say that a daily word count of 488 makes it possible for you to do a great deal of catching up with very little time. So let's see here. We've got in the category of reviews and discussions, that sort of thing. I found a new channel called Mudja and Noor Read, two young ladies who this time around paired The Stranger with the Meursault investigation, a novel about Camus' book that came out recently and that I thought was wonderful. It was a very good discussion. A thing called Vintage Vlog, which I only just discovered. I think it's an actual BookTube vlog from Vintage Press, but it doesn't come off as a shill channel at all. He did a wonderful tag that I'm going to do myself about our experiences with independent bookshops. You'll love it when you watch it. I'll leave the links to all of these things down below. Neil Griffiths, fellow million-year-old gray-haired brontosaurus on BookTube, did a very good, very unsparing discussion of the vegetarian, the much-lauded vegetarian. I have already said on this channel that I think it's just a tad overrated. I think he does too, and his discussion leaves mine in the shade. Of course, I only mentioned the book. It's well worth your time to watch, even if you love the book. Let's see here. Hanya Yanagihara's book, A Little Life, talk about much lauded, came in for a little rough handling on BookTube last week from the restricted section, and also hilariously from Adam at Mementomori, who also reached 500 subscribers and is probably at 600 by now. Well deserved. Congrats to Adam. These attacks on her book are actually mirror a wider reaction across the critical world, and those of us who, my friend at the Washington Post, my friend at the Wall Street Journal, a bunch of critics don't have any choice but to simply say, well, some of the things you bring up are right. It's still a great book. We're in the unlikely position of being put back on our defenses on what is self-evidently the towering novel of the age, of the recent years. But that's the way it is, and that's the way it should be. Let's see here. Giselle Bradley started doing some BookTube videos outside in the sunlight. Very disorienting. Wonderful, but disorienting to all of us who are holed up in our rooms. And Wish Fulfillment. She's a wonderful channel. She did a video on retired favorites, a concept that she has coined, where she takes books that she has loved in the past, that have been her favorite books in the past, and retires them, acknowledges that they no longer answer her current reading needs, and retires them. Doesn't turn her back on them, doesn't excoriate them, but puts them aside in order to make room for new favorites. And I was watching that and I was thinking, God almighty, what I wouldn't give if all of BookTube did that. The necrophilic clinging to past favorites, the doubling down and calling them critically great, reading them through as if they were some sort of... That reaction might be commendable on one level as a kind of loyalty, but it greatly retards reading progress. If you are going on at great length about the subtextual critical vitality of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, when in a normal human lifespan are you ever going to get around to doing the same thing for The Way We Live Now by Anthony Trollope or Bleak House by Charles Dickens? You're not. You won't have the time to do it. Those two things can't be done on the same critical spectrum. If you don't retire your earlier favorites, you're stuck with them, and that's not good. So I was very happy for that turn. Let's see here. There were two things that, two channels that aren't BookTube, and ordinarily I leave non-BookTube channels off these little autopsies, but these two channels are so good, and this time both of them dealt with literary subjects, so that I figured they came close enough to BookTube to warrant a mention. The first is Mr. Deity, a channel that especially all of you atheists out there should be watching. He's just delightful. And he did a profanity-laced excoriation of Larry Alex Taunton's new book, The Faith of Christopher Hitchens, in which Taunton claims that Hitchens, the world's most outspoken atheist, was having a last-minute change of heart towards Christianity as his illness worsened. I reviewed this loathsome thing myself, but Mr. Deity does the kind of job that I could not do for an audience, for a family audience. And the other one is Evan from the Nerdwriter, Evan Pushek, but who's one of the smartest people on YouTube, and whose channel you should be not only watching, but in this rare instance, financially supporting, since he's mortgaged everything to do it. It's his whole life now. And he did a thing called Why Dragons Halt Progress, which is ostensibly about Game of Thrones, but as with all of his meditations, it ends up being about so much more. He's well worth binge watching for you. And let's see here. There were a couple of returns to BookTube. Arthur at Chapter Select, one of the smartest booktubers out there, has continued his step-by-step return, and I wholeheartedly encourage it. And also, Simon Savage of the great book blog SavideGereads returned to BookTube at the behest of Jen Campbell. So it's yet another thing we all owe Jen Campbell. His BookTube channel turns out to be every bit as super smart and chatty and self-effacing and also catty as his book blog is. It's well worth subscribing. I hope he sticks around. There was another vlog. CarolineReads has started doing vlogs, and her first one was called Makeup, Book Browsing, and More Shenanigans, where she and her sister go to Target, ostensibly, to browse their makeup aisle so that her sister can do her makeup. But when she gets to the book section of Target, let's just say her enthusiasm spikes. It's pretty clear where her heart is during that little voyage. I thought it was hilarious, and I've watched the rest of her channel. Every bit is hilarious. You should all subscribe. And the funniest disclaimer, a little category that I don't know what I'll always do, but in this case I couldn't avoid it, was a channel I just recently discovered, Nash, at the Book Bat, was in the middle of doing a book tag when she said, I apologize if you hear some screaming in my background. My brother is playing with my cousins, and what can you do? I just cracked up when I saw that. She didn't edit out the screaming. She just said, what are you going to do? And let's see here. There were two serious discussions. Two discussions that go right to the heart of a lot of what BookTubing is about. I want you all to watch them, and I want you all to comment on them and maybe make response videos. These are, unlike some things I could name, these are discussions that BookTube really should be having. The first one was David at the Poptimist, who did a thing called Don't Call It a Slump, in which he talks about the fact that he has been the victim of the most unlikely kind of oppression in the reading world. He's read a string of good books. Nothing horrible. And nothing great, just a string of good books. And as he points out in the video, before BookTube, he would have considered that a great run of reading. So that's fascinating to me, what BookTube has done to all our perceptions of reading. I want to hear everybody's thoughts on that. And the Deckled Edge did a video hilariously titled. This guy's got a talent for video titles called "They Shoot the BookTubers, Don't They?" in which he pours out his heart about what his channel should be, what it shouldn't be, what's important and what's not. That's just utterly fascinating. Again, deserves discussion. And speaking of discussion, last thing I want to mention today, we come back full circle to the guys at Strip Cover Lit. They have a thing that they do, a variety hour, where they talk about just issues, you know, BookTube issues and whatnot. It's delightful. Wish I'd thought of it. I guess this is it for me. And although their latest variety hour had a couple of annoying moments for me, including a discussion of a subject I am trying to avoid with humans, and that is the murder of that gorilla who was playing around with a kid who was in his enclosure, who had fallen into his enclosure. I'm going to try to avoid the subject here as well, but to put it mildly, when I hear humans, because of course no one else can weigh in on the subject, just complacently saying, oh, well, he's got a kid in his hands, take the shot, shoot him twice, got no choice, got a kid in his hand, got a kid in the enclosure, about a prisoner who's 99% genetically human, and who didn't want to be there, and who... Well, there I go. I'm starting to do it. I'm not going to do it. But aside from subjects like that, they also brought up an utterly fascinating point. Adrian Fort, at one point, I think went off script and just said that, of course, the end goal of Strip Cover Lit, and he assumes the end goal of all of the booktubers, is to do it full time, to do it as a job, to get enough viewership and enough traffic and whatnot, so that you don't have to do anything else. You can just make videos for a living. I immediately wanted to know, is that the end goal of the rest of you? How many of you is... I mean, Adrian seems to me to be a guy who always has a game plan, and I very much like that. But is that true for most of you? I mean, leaving out the enormous, 100,000 subscriber booktubers that I'm sure aren't watching this anyway. What about the rest of you? What about the real people, the real booktubers? If I'm not going to get in trouble for the word real, you know what I mean. I mean the people who just set up a camera and don't have sponsors and don't have 100,000 subscribers, just where it seemed to me, until I heard that from him, as just a hobby. It certainly is a hobby for me. I wouldn't want to do this full time. But I want to know about the rest of you. When you hear that, do you nod in agreement? Do you think, well, yes, that is the ultimate goal. If I could tomorrow do this only full time, I would. Do you think that? I'd love to know, either in my comments or in the comments on that video. I'd love to know if people think that. And that was it. That was a very abbreviated version of Last Week in BookTube. Just some highlights that I wanted you all to be aware of if you missed them. And I'll go back to regularly scheduled videos right away. So thank you, BookTube.